How far would you bend to rules to win if technically you weren't breaking them? I met Marcus Chen on the first day of 6th grade when he sat down next to me in homeroom, adjusted his glasses, and immediately started calculating the optimal route through our class schedule to minimize hallway time. That's just who Marcus was. He didn't see rules as boundaries. He saw them as puzzles with loopholes waiting to be discovered. By 8th grade, we've been best friends for 2 years, and I'd watched him find creative solutions to everything from dodgeball strategies to cafeteria line efficiency. But nothing prepared me for what he'd do with Mr. Peterson's bridge competition. Mr. Peterson was our science teacher, a well-meaning guy in his 50s who genuinely loved getting kids excited about engineering. One Monday morning in October, he wheeled in a cart with what looked like thousands of toothpicks and announced the annual school-wide bridge building competition. His eyes lit up as he explained it. This competition has been a tradition at Jefferson Middle School for over 15 years, he said, pacing excitedly at the front of the classroom. Students from all 3 grades will compete to build the strongest bridge using only toothpicks. Your bridge must span exactly 12 inches between 2 platforms. It must be made entirely of toothpicks. And here's where it gets interesting. You can use any adhesive you want, any glue, any amount. Be creative. He pulled out examples from previous years, showing photographs of elegant arch bridges, suspension bridges with red acting as cables, and intricate truss designs. The current record is 47 pounds before failure. I'm hoping one of you brilliant minds will break it this year. Most kids seemed mildly interested. Some were already doodling bridge designs in their notebooks. But when I glanced over at Marcus, I recognized that look. His eyes had that particular gleam that meant his brain was already running calculations, finding angles nobody else would see. Did you hear that? He whispered to me as Mr. Peterson continued explaining the timeline. Any adhesive, any amount. Yes, so. I whisper back. So everyone's going to focus on the toothpick structure. They're thinking about engineering principles, load distribution, arch strength. He tapped his pencil against his notebook. But the rules don't say the glue is just for connecting toothpicks. They say you can use any amount. I didn't fully understand what he meant yet, but I knew Marcus well enough to know he'd figured something out. Over the next few days, I watched as our classmates got to work on their bridges. My friend Sarah spent hours researching different bridge designs, settling on a Warren truss pattern she'd found in an engineering book. Tommy Rodriguez went for a simple arch design, carefully cutting and sanding each toothpick to fit perfectly. Even the usually unmotivated kids in class seemed engaged, constructing delicate lattice structures during study hall. Marcus, meanwhile, seemed to be working on something completely different. He wasn't in a library researching bridge designs. Instead, he'd started doing something I'd never seen him do voluntarily: extra credit work. Mr. Peterson, thrilled by Marcus's sudden enthusiasm, had offered extra credit for completing additional worksheets on various science topics. Most students ignored these because the extra credit was minimal, just a few points that wouldn't significantly impact your grade. But Marcus was completing them obsessively. Dude, what are you doing? I asked him one day at lunch as he worked through his 5th worksheet of the week. You already have an A in Peterson's class. Marcus looked up with a slight smile. I'm not doing this for the grade. Look at the reward. I read the fine print at the top of the worksheet. Students who complete extra credit assignments may select materials from the classroom supply cabinet. So Peterson has about 10,000 toothpicks in that cabinet. Each worksheet lets me take 100. I've already stockpiled 800, and I'm going for at least 3,000. 3,000? Marcus, the bridge only needs to be 12 inches long. Why would you need 3,000 toothpicks? He just grinned. You'll see. The following week, Marcus showed up at my house after school with 2 large shopping bags full of toothpicks and a small container that looked serious and industrial. Is that what I think it is? I asked, eyeing the container nervously. Industrial grade epoxy resin. Marcus confirmed, setting it carefully on my garage workbench. My dad uses it at his engineering firm for bonding metal components. This stuff, once it cures, is stronger than concrete. Each tube costs $40, and I got 6 of them. Your dad just gave you $240 worth of construction adhesive? I told him it was for a school project, which is technically true. Marcus started unpacking toothpicks. I also told him I wanted to learn about material science and composite structures. He was so excited about my interest in engineering that he bought extra. I watched as Marcus laid out his materials. Okay, so what's the actual plan here? Marcus pulled out a sketch he'd been working on. Unlike the elegant bridge designs our classmates were creating, his drawing looked more like a rectangular brick. Everyone else is thinking about this wrong, he explained. They're trying to build a bridge that's strong because of its structural design. Arches, trusses, load distribution. All of that is based on using minimal materials rules efficiently. Right, because that's what engineering is. Sure, but the rules don't require efficient use of materials. They just say the bridge has to be made of toothpicks and span 12 inches. They don't limit the number of toothpicks or the amount of glue. He pointed to his sketch. So instead of building a hollow structure, I'm building a solid composite material. Toothpicks aren't just going to be the structure. They're going to be the filler in an epoxy matrix. I stared at him. You're basically building a brick. I'm building a toothpick and epoxy composite beam, he corrected. But yes, essentially a brick. The epoxy will fill every gap between toothpicks, creating a solid mass. The wood fibers from the toothpicks will reinforce the epoxy, and the epoxy will bind everything into a single, incredibly strong unit. That seems like cheating. Ow! I'm following every rule. It's made entirely of toothpicks. It spans exactly 12 inches. I'm using adhesive, which is explicitly allowed without restriction. Marcus started arranging toothpicks in a mold he'd created from cardboard. It's not my fault. Everyone else is thinking inside the box. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Marcus work on his creation in my garage. He'd chosen my house because his mom would have asked too many questions about the chemical smell from the epoxy. The process was meticulous and honestly kind of impressive, even if it felt like he was gaming the system. First, he built a mold exactly 12 inches long, 4 inches wide, and 3 inches deep. Then he started layering. He'd place a layer of toothpicks, all aligned parallel to each other, then pour epoxy over them, working it into every gap with a stick. Then another layer of toothpicks perpendicular to the first layer. More epoxy. Another layer parallel to the first. More epoxy. Why are you alternating the direction? I asked, watching him work one afternoon. Cross-grain reinforcement, he explained, carefully pouring another layer of epoxy. Like plywood, it prevents the structure from splitting along the grain. Makes it stronger in all directions. The smell was intense, chemical, and sharp, and we had to keep the garage door open despite the October chill. Marcus wore gloves and safety glasses, working with the precision of scientists. Each layer had to be perfect, with no air bubbles, no gaps, complete saturation of the epoxy into the wood. How much is this thing going to weigh? I asked after watching him add the 20th layer. Probably 15 to 20 pounds, Marcus estimated. The epoxy is dense, and I'm using a lot of it. How are you going to carry it to school? Very carefully. It took Marcus the full 2 weeks to complete his bridge. When he finally removed it from the mold, it looked nothing like what anyone would call a bridge. It was a dark, glossy, rectangular block, slightly translucent if you held it up to the light, with the shadows of thousands of toothpicks visible inside like some kind of modern art piece. It's beautiful, Marcus said, admiring his work. It's ridiculous, I countered. Peterson is going to freak out. Peterson is going to have to admit it follows all the rules. The day before the competition, Marcus carefully wrapped his creation in bubble wrap and placed it in a reinforced cardboard box. He'd even calculated the weight distribution for carrying it, creating handles on the sides of the box that would balance the load. Competition day arrived on a Friday in early November. The entire middle school was buzzing with excitement. Mr. Peterson had set up the testing station in the gymnasium so everyone could watch. He'd created a platform system with 2 stands exactly 12 inches apart, with a bucket hanging between them where he'd add weights. Students from all 3 grades had entered, and their bridges were displayed on tables around the gym. They were genuinely impressive works of engineering. Sarah's Warren Truss bridge was elegant and precise, each joint carefully glued, the whole structure weighing maybe 2 ounces. Tommy's arch bridge was beautiful, with a graceful curve that looked like something from ancient Rome. An 8th grader named Jennifer had created an intricate suspension bridge with red cables that was honestly a work of art. Then there was Marcus's entry, still in its box, sitting heavily on the table. Mr. Peterson started the competition with the 6th grade entries, working his way up. He'd place each bridge across the gap, then slowly add weights to the bucket. 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 15 pounds. Most of the 6th grade bridges failed between 10 and 20 pounds, their glue joints separating or their structures buckling. The kids were good sports about it, applauding each other's efforts. The 7th grade bridges performed better, more sophisticated designs, better construction techniques. A few made it past 30 pounds before failing. Sarah's bridge held an impressive 38 pounds before one of the joints gave way, and she was thrilled, hugging her teammates and celebrating. Then came the 8th grade entries. These were the serious competitors, kids who'd spent weeks perfecting their designs. Jennifer's suspension bridge held 41 pounds before the thread cable snapped. Another student's arch design made it to 44 pounds, just 3 pounds short of the school record. Tommy's bridge was next, and his arch design was performing beautifully. Mr. Peterson kept adding weights, pounds, and the crowd was getting excited. 45 pounds, 46 pounds, 47 pounds, tying the record. At 48 pounds, there was an audible crack, and everyone held their breath. But it helped. 49 pounds, 50 pounds, new record, Mr. Peterson announced, and the gym erupted in cheers. Tommy was grinning ear to ear, high-fiving his friends. His bridge finally failed at 53 pounds, a decisive crack echoing through the gym as the arch collapsed. Incredible work, Tommy, Mr. Peterson said, genuinely impressed. That's a new school record. Let's see if anyone can beat it. There are only 2 entries left. One was a fairly standard truss design that failed at 32 pounds. And then there was Marcus's entry. Marcus carried his box to the platform, and I could see Mr. Peterson's confusion as he watched Marcus struggle slightly with the weight. That's quite a container. Marcus, Mr. Peterson said. Let's see what you've built. Marcus opened the box and carefully lifted out his creation. The gym went quiet for a moment. Then someone laughed. Then someone else. Within seconds, half the gym was laughing or whispering in confusion. What is that? Someone called out. That's not a bridge. That's a brick, another student yelled. Marcus's face reddened slightly, but he maintained his composure. He carefully placed his epoxy toothpick composite across the gap. It sat there, solid and immovable, looking absolutely nothing like any of the elegant structures that had come before. Mr. Peterson looked puzzled. He walked around the structure, examining it from all angles. He picked it up, testing its weight, feeling its surface. I could see his brain working, trying to figure out if this somehow violated the rules. Marcus, he finally said, can you explain your design philosophy here? It's a composite material structure, Marcus explained calmly. Toothpicks embedded in an epoxy matrix, creating a solid beam with reinforcement in multiple directions. The rules stated the bridge must be made of toothpicks with any adhesive allowed. This is made entirely of toothpicks, with epoxy as the bonding agent. Mr. Peterson frowned. The spirit of the competition is to demonstrate engineering principles through structural design. And I've demonstrated the engineering principle of composite materials, Marcus countered, like fiberglass or carbon fiber, with fibers in a resin matrix. It's a legitimate engineering concept used in aerospace and construction. I could see Mr. Peterson struggling. Technically, Marcus was right. He'd followed every stated rule, but this clearly wasn't what the competition was meant to showcase. Well, Mr. Peterson said slowly, let's see how it performs. He started adding weights to the bucket. 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds. Marcus's bridge didn't flex even slightly. It sat there like a piece of furniture, completely unaffected. 30 pounds, 40 pounds, 50 pounds, breaking Tommy's record. Not even a tremor. The gym had gone from laughter to stunned silence. Mr. Peterson kept adding weights, his expression shifting from confusion to frustration. 60 pounds, 70 pounds, 80 pounds. This is absurd, Mr. Peterson muttered, but he kept going. 90 pounds, 100 pounds. The bucket was running out of weights. Marcus's bridge hadn't flexed even a millimeter. Okay, Mr. Peterson said, stepping back. Let's try something different. He removed the bucket and repositioned the bridge across 2 stacks of textbooks, creating a wider gap. Then, carefully, he stepped onto the bridge himself. Mr. Peterson weighed at least 180 pounds. The bridge flexed slightly, maybe a quarter inch, but held firm. The entire middle school was now watching in complete disbelief. Mr. Peterson stood there for a moment, bouncing slightly, testing it. Solid. Unbelievable, he said, stepping down. He looked at Marcus with a mixture of frustration and grudging respect. You've certainly created something strong. Can we keep testing it? Marcus asked. I'd like to know its actual failure point. Mr. Peterson looked around the gym, clearly trying to figure out what to do. I don't have enough weights here to break this thing. What about your car? Someone shouted from the crowd. Mr. Peterson blinked. What? Your car? Several students echoed. Drive your car onto it. A chant started building. Car. Mr. Peterson held up his hands. Okay. Let's take this outside, but I'm not promising anything. The entire middle school filed out to the parking lot. Teachers trying to maintain order, but clearly as curious as the students. Mr. Peterson drove his Honda Civic to an open area, and Marcus carefully positioned his bridge on the asphalt, propped up on blocks. If this damages my car, Marcus, you're explaining it to the principal, Mr. Peterson said, but he was smiling now, caught up in the absurdity of the situation. Slowly, carefully, Mr. Peterson drove forward until one front wheel rolled onto Marcus's bridge. The bridge flexed, maybe half an inch, and there was a collective gasp from the crowd, but it held, completely solid. Mr. Peterson sat there for a moment, his car tire resting on a bridge made of toothpicks, or at least technically made of toothpicks. Then he started laughing. He put the car in park, got out, and just stood there shaking his head. I have absolutely no way to break this thing, he announced to the crowd. Marcus Chen has built something that I cannot test to failure with the resources was available to a middle school science teacher. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Marcus was grinning now, soaking in his moment of triumph. Students were taking photos, surrounding him, asking how he did it. Mr. Peterson walked over to Marcus, and I tensed, worried he might disqualify him on some technicality. Instead, he extended his hand. "Congratulations, Marcus. You won the competition." He shook Marcus's hand, then added quietly, "And you've also ensured that I'll be rewriting the rules for next year." Marcus accepted his trophy, a small golden bridge on a wooden base, while the entire school applauded. Tommy was a good sport about it, congratulating Marcus even though his record had been obliterated. Sarah rolled her eyes but smiled, calling Marcus a rules lawyer in the most affectionate way possible. That evening, Marcus and I sat in my garage, his trophy between us, his bridge still sitting on the workbench. So I said, "How does it feel to win by technically not cheating?" Marcus considered this. "Honestly, pretty good. I saw an opportunity in the rules, and I took it. That's not cheating. That's creative problem solving. You know, everyone thinks you gamed the system, right? Maybe I did, but the system allowed it. If the rules don't account for creative interpretations, that's a flaw in the rules, not in my approach." I couldn't really argue with that logic, even if it felt a bit unsatisfying. Marcus had won, fair and square by the letter of the law, even if he'd completely ignored the spirit of the competition. The following Monday, Mr. Peterson announced the updated rules for next year's competition. Maximum glue amount specified by weight. Minimum hollow space required in the bridge design. Specific structural requirements. He'd closed every loophole Marcus had exploited. "I hope you're proud of yourself, Mr. Chen," he said, but he was smiling. "You've made this competition much more complicated for everyone. Just trying to advance the field of middle school engineering, Mr. Peterson," Marcus replied with a grin. Marcus's bridge became legendary at Jefferson Middle School. It sat in the science classroom trophy case for years, this dark, heavy block of epoxy and toothpicks that didn't look like a bridge at all. New students would ask about it, and teachers would tell the story of the year Marcus Chen broke the competition so thoroughly they had to rewrite the rules. As for Marcus and me, we stayed friends through high school. He went on to study engineering in college, which surprised exactly no one. Last I heard, he was working for a tech company, finding creative solutions to complex problems, probably still looking for loopholes in every system he encountered. Sometimes I think about that bridge and what it represented. Was Marcus a genius who saw possibilities others missed? Or was he someone who valued winning over the spirit of fair competition? Maybe he was both. Maybe that's what made him successful. One thing's for sure. He taught everyone at Jefferson Middle School an important lesson. Rules matter, but how you interpret them matters just as much. And sometimes, the person who thinks differently, who sees angles nobody else considers, who's willing to stack thousands of toothpicks in industrial epoxy while everyone else is building delicate arches, that person wins. Even if they have to change the rules afterward to make sure nobody ever does it again. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more tales of creative rule bending and unexpected victories.